Awesome. Welcome to our second CE session of the season. This one is about improving your student communications. Really excited to have you all here. We got a great turnout last week and excited to see some familiar faces in the room this week, and some folks that I haven't gotten to know yet. I'll introduce myself more formally here in just a second, but we're going to do some quick housekeeping first. If you're not speaking, go ahead and mute your mic if you don't mind. That way we don't get any feedback as we're, any microphone feedback as we're talking. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the session, and you're always welcome to drop questions into the chat and we can address those as they come up as well. Whitney and I will kind of be tag teaming as each of us is talking. The other will be keeping an eye on questions in the chat. So feel free to raise your hand or put a question in the chat and we'll leave time at the end as well, but just go ahead and mute your mic because I'm the world's most distractible human. And then also, you probably just heard the little robot voice tell us that this webinar is being recorded. By remaining in the webinar, you're consenting to being part of the recorded session. We are going to post it on AIARE's YouTube channel, and your name and image may appear, particularly if you ask a question. So just know that our 1,200 YouTube subscribers are mostly AIARE students and instructors, so should be no problem with that, but wanted to let folks know. With that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm gonna introduce Whitney a little bit and then I'll let her talk a little bit about her background. But I'm really excited to have Whitney on this call. She's really good at a lot of things, but bragging about herself isn't one of them. So I'm going to do a little bit of that for her. Whitney is our marketing director. She's been with AIARE a little over a year and a half now, Whit, I think. And she was working with us on a contract basis before that. So we've been lucky enough to work with Whitney for quite a while now. And Whitney and I also have worked together on and off for about 10 years now at a bunch of different jobs. And I've just been continually impressed with her. She's a really creative thinker. She's also really good at seeing a big picture problem and finding like kind of out of the box solutions to make a difference. So we're really lucky to have Whitney here. She brings some big name outdoor industry clients in her freelance experience and was a marketing director at the American Alpine Club. So really excited to have her here and excited to have roped her into this tonight. And she's going to talk to us about some of the fancy email tricks that are like way beyond me. So I'm going to let her talk a little bit about that in just a second when we jump into her slides. But then also just to let you know why I am here. I have a communications background as well, and I also believe that communications are one of the most important parts of education, right? Like as educators, we are first and foremost communicators, and it's our job to get an audience-centered message to our students. So in the not just education, but actual communications world, I was an account manager for a small boutique marketing agency for a couple of years called Bonfire Collective. I've actually worked with some of the folks in this room in that capacity, including with AIARE. And then I was a freelance writer and editor and worked with a bunch of brands and nonprofit clients in the industry. So I have a little bit of a communications background, just enough to know what I don't know and to know when I need to go to Whitney. So that's a little bit about us. Whitney, anything you want to add about like your work with AIARE or anything that you're working on right now, or just kind of give folks a little bit of a sense of your role and what that looks like at AIARE?
Yeah, hey everyone. Thanks, Emma, for doing the intro. So over the last year and a half at AIARE, I've spent a lot of time. We have a big, audience for our email. So I've spent a lot of time trying to do exactly what we're talking about tonight, which is make our email communications more thoughtful, make sure we're communicating after students go through a course so that they can progress and continue on in their avalanche education journey. So we've been building out welcome emails, whether you're have just taken a rec course. I'm working right now to build out one if you're taking a Pro 1 course so that you have some tips before you take that course. And we're just kind of continuing to build out those communications. So that's one of the big things I've been working on. We've got the year-end appeal coming up this month, and we have done a little bit more storytelling and talking about AIARE and doing some PR since I've started as well. So I'd say those are some of the things we've been working on.
Awesome. Thanks, Whit. Yeah, that year-end appeal Whitney's talking about, all those letters you get towards the end of the year, all those like, okay, now's the time, give your favorite nonprofit some money before December 31st so you can write it off for tax purposes. It's Whitney's job to make those sound really appealing. And she's really good at it. So lucky to have her in that regard as well from a fundraising perspective, because communications and fundraising often overlap. So as you all probably can guess, a small nonprofit means folks wear many hats, and that is the case at AIARE. So, okay, that's a little bit about us. And I want to learn a little bit about you all here in just a second. Before we move into any of that, I want to do a little bit of expectation setting for our work together tonight. I'll tell you an agenda for what we're going to go over this evening. And then I have a couple of questions for you. And I even, this I feel like is really bold of me, I set up a Zoom poll and I'm hoping we can use it. And if not, I'll just have people drop stuff in the chat. So I figured after last week, I was like, I had so many technical difficulties, it can't really get much worse than that. So I might as well just go for it with the poll. So we're going to send it. We'll see how that goes. First of all, just a little bit of expectation setting. Some of what we're going to be talking about tonight involves creating a positive learning environment on your courses. And so I always, when I'm doing a workshop with instructors, I always want to model that kind of PLE and expectation setting in my own workshops and my own teaching, just as I'm asking our instructors to do for students. So I'll do a little bit of that now. Basically, all of the things that you would ask of your students and all of the things that I know area instructors come to the table doing, but good to always get that out there. Asking folks to respect one another's time and experiences. It's really awesome to see. I know a lot of the names and faces that we have here tonight. Some of you I happen to know are longtime area instructors, and some of you I recognize as pretty new instructors. And I'm really excited to have that mix of people. I think it's really great to have a diversity of experiences, but also great to have folks by respecting one another's time, I mean, like, appreciate giving folks a chance to speak, and also, paying attention when other folks are talking. That active listening is really appreciated. That's something that area instructors are really good at and outdoor educators are really good at as a general rule. So generally goes without saying, but I'm saying it anyway. Again, assuming positive intent, I think sometimes when we start to talk about establishing positive learning environments, we start to use some words and expressions that if they're new to some folks, it's really easy to be like, I don't know what that means. Am I not doing that? Are you telling me I'm not doing a good job setting up expectations on my courses? That's not the case. I generally assume that area instructors, particularly the folks who are taking time out of their evenings to come to a CE workshop, are really conscientious folks who want to do a really good job. You may be doing some of what's here without realizing it or without having the words for it that we're using, but generally we assume positive intent of everyone who shows up here, and we ask that you do the same of each other and of us. And then that openness to growth and the lifelong learner perspective that really goes along with any AIARE course that you would encounter on an ITC or a CLT or with your students, just asking folks to continue coming to this with a growth mindset. And then if there are other expectations or requests of AIARE or that you have of one another, go ahead and drop those in the chat, or feel free to raise a hand or unmute and let me know what those are. All right, I don't want to cut things off. Go ahead and drop things in the chat. I'm going to keep moving just because I want to get us through. We have a fair amount to cover, and I want to make sure we have time at the end for questions, but don't want to cut things off. Feel free to drop them in the chat. Tonight's workshop, just to give you a sense of what's in store, we're going to talk a little bit about communication, pre-course communication as a way to establish a positive learning environment. We're going to spend the bulk of our time on pre-course communications, because that is a way to set up that PLE. And then once you have the stuff down from those pre-course communications, the post-course communications employ a lot of the same principles. So we'll spend most of our time there. We have a couple breakout rooms set up. And so I have a document set up for us there that we'll get a chance to practice. We'll do a quick bio break because 90 minutes is a really long time to sit still, especially at this point in the day. So do a quick stretch and grab some water. We'll talk about some post-course communications, and then I will extend an invitation to the folks who are in this workshop. I am happy to review post-course, pre or post-course communications from anybody who has registered for this workshop and has made the time to attend tonight. If you want to send me your stuff, I'm happy to review it and give you some feedback on it if that's helpful to you. So we'll talk a little bit more about how that can work at the end. And then, of course, we'll leave some time for questions. Before I move on to establishing a PLE, okay, we're going to try it. We're going to do the poll. All right, I'm going to launch this poll. Is something happening? Are you seeing a poll? Great. If you could go ahead and answer the questions in the poll, that will be helpful to me. It's always such a pleasant surprise when technology works like I expect it to. Awesome. Okay, looks like most folks are answering or have answered. Oops. Oh no. Oh, here it is. Okay, sorry. I briefly lost the poll, but it's back. Okay. Okay, great. So just to let folks know, again, like nerdy outdoor educator in me can't help but do a little bit of formative assessment. So I can try to tailor my teaching tonight to who's in the room. So I was curious to know if we had instructors or course leaders. Looks like we have a pretty even split of instructors and course leaders. So course leaders, if you have been, if you went through an AIARE course leader training in the last 2 years, you may be seeing some repeat information. Some of the resources that we're using are really similar to what we developed for the CLT. If you're an instructor who hasn't done a CLT or you took your CLT longer ago than the last 2-3 years, hopefully some of this information will be new to you. Also really excited to see that we do have a pretty good mix of the like less than 3 all the way up to 8+ years. And it looks like, again, a pretty even split of folks who do a couple courses a season and those 5+ courses a season. The reason I asked about that is because I was curious, if you teach 4 or fewer courses a season, it's less of a lift to like write out your email each time and tailor it really specifically for the course that you're teaching. Whereas if you're teaching 5+ courses a season, my guess or my assumption is that some of those are butting up against each other, and you really need to have like a template ready to go that you can load into your email and get out the door, like fill in some details, date, time, that kind of thing, and get out the door. And if you're having to do that 5 or more times, you're not wanting to have to like start from scratch ever. Also nice to have a template for 4 or fewer, but that helps me understand a little bit more about who's in the room tonight. So thank you. And thank you for indulging me. I'm really excited that I got to use the poll and that it worked. How fun. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, just going to minimize that. Let's talk a little bit about establishing a positive learning environment and what that means in terms of course communication. So this is like, I feel like such a perfect picture to think about establishing a positive learning environment. Many of you probably know Margaret Wheeler, and this is like the most Margaret picture. And I know that by the time we get to the point where Margaret's like in her pink onesie with her awesome floral fanny pack pointing at stuff, she's already spent a lot of time establishing a PLE. But I think about like, if I'm on a course with Margaret, I know what is expected of me. So she's my idol when it comes to establishing PLE. So she's like, I'm leaving her up here as inspiration to us all. Really what this comes down to, and I have a resource that I'm happy to share on this with a little bit more detail and some resources, but really what it comes down to is that as educators, as avalanche educators in the outdoor space, but any kind of educator, we are ultimately the folks who are responsible for creating a learning environment that's inclusive to everybody on the course. That includes folks who are just showing up for their first avalanche course ever, all the way up to folks who are like, I took my first AIARE or my first Rec 1 course 20 years ago, and everybody's peer pressuring me and says I have to refresh and I have to practice rescue before they'll go out with me again. We want to make sure everybody feels like there's a place for them on a course, on any course that we teach. But that really good risk management requires open communication, two-way communication, and we really need input and buy-in from everybody in the group. And that can be really challenging, particularly when you often, we're in an age where often stuff like this starts or takes place entirely on Zoom. Like you may meet your students on Zoom and then they that's the only time you meet them in person or close to in person until they show up in the field. And it's a little trickier to do when you don't have the face time that we often, that we in the days of yore got with students in like a classroom where you maybe met or met for a couple hours in the morning in a classroom. Things just, the landscape looks a little bit different. And so we really need to catch up in terms of how we're establishing that positive learning environment and really keeping a beginner's mindset to make our students feel comfortable. So really all this is to say that fostering that positive learning environment starts with us, the people who are role modeling for our students. So these are kind of my ground rules for establishing a positive learning environment. By the time your first introduction with students is over, they should know expectations, both of themselves and of you and of one another, and also what that looks like. It's easy to say, like, let's all be respectful of one another, but like students need to know what kind of environment they're stepping into. And when I say your first introduction with students, what I really mean is the first time students get an email from you, and that can be really challenging. We're going to go over a bunch of different examples tonight, and we'll have some, I have a sort of bare bones example that I'm going to ask folks to spruce up a little bit. But when I think about the difference between getting an email that tells me a lot about what's going to happen and one that doesn't tell me enough, I think about my experience as a learner. So I'm going to share an example because this like made a pretty big impact on me. A couple years ago, my family got chickens for the first time, and I was really excited about the fresh eggs, and I thought the chickens were really cute. I knew that I shouldn't name them because I didn't want to get too attached to them, just in case, and that turned out to be a really good thing. But at some point in there, my husband decided that we should do a run of meat birds, which are, in case you have never interacted with a meat bird, they're not cute, fluffy chickens. They're chickens that are like ready to go, like they are being raised to go in your freezer. They have a humane life. And then at the end of the day, like that, their job is not to be a cute pet or lay eggs for you. It's to be dinner. So as part of this, I was like, I'm going to be really intentional about this. And I signed up for a chicken butchering class at my local co-op. And I had no idea what I was walking into. I was really nervous about it, and I was like, what have I done as I'm getting ready to go to my first night of the class? And I got this pre-course email from the person teaching the class that like it could have made or broken my experience, and it really made it. Like if I hadn't gotten any information, or if I had just gotten like okay, show up to the co-op at this date on this time, be there, be square. Like I would have done it. I would have made myself go, but I wouldn't have had as good of an experience. And what I got was this incredibly detailed, thoughtful, like compassionate and kind email that was like, hi, you might have signed up for this class because you've never butchered a chicken before. It's a big deal to take something's life. And like, here are some of the things you should know about that. Here's what you should wear. Here's what you should plan to do. Like, maybe don't eat right beforehand if this isn't something you've done before. Maybe like plan to like not have a bunch of stuff you have to do immediately afterwards because it could be kind of stressful, or you might not know how you're going to react to something like this. So like maybe don't like meet up with a bunch of friends you haven't seen in a while over beers after this. Like this is the night to like go home and chill. And like some of it was a little like maybe a little more than I needed, but I think about like, I knew what I was supposed to wear. I knew what I was supposed to bring. I knew that there were like, that told me that the person teaching the class like cared about my experience. And also it told me that I wasn't going to be the only person in the class who had never done something like that before, and that it was okay to be kind of nervous about it. So there's a super extreme example. Please don't butcher chickens in your AIARE courses. We like generally don't approve of that. It's a little outside the scope of our curriculum. But the reason I'm telling you this is that a really awesome pre-course email can make such a huge difference in a student's experience. And if we bring ourselves back to that beginner's mindset, like think about the last time you did something for the first time. What could have made that experience better? And what did make it really good or bad? And so that's my kind of extreme example of the importance of establishing a positive learning environment before your students show up to your course. I have some really good examples I'm excited to share with you, and we'll get into a little bit more about what that means. But these are kind of my 4 ground rules for establishing a PLE before students even show up to your course. Okay, let's talk a little bit about pre-course communications. Whitney, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about subject line best practices. We're gonna step away from chickens and talk a little bit more about how to set up students for success on an AIARE course, beginning with that very first email that they get from you.
Thanks, Emma. Okay, so if I'm talking too fast, let me know, but we'll go over some pretty quick subject line recommendations. This can be a deal breaker, as all of you know, because everybody gets a million emails a day, and you're really probably selective like I am about why I'm opening something if it's not from my boss and I need to open and I'm like, what is this? Let me know. So this is always a good idea to like start here, think about making sure that first of all it's personalized. So centering your student is a main thing you can do to make this make your subject line stand out. Hey Emma, get ready for your AIARE 1 course, or your AIARE course is coming up, get ready by X, Y, and Z. The other thing to do, or you can do, is create some urgency. So please read this. This is important. Things like that are ways you can get somebody to open up your email. And then the other 2 things I have for you are make it searchable. So especially for those slackers that don't open the email and then right before are like, what was I supposed to be doing? That's a good way to make sure that they find your email and they know they can find it when they need it. So that's not necessarily how someone's going to open it, but it can also be really helpful in making sure that your email is found. And then last but not least, make sure that your subject line is clear and concise. What is in the email? Why would somebody open this? If they're getting 10 emails today, what makes yours the one that they want to open? And most people, I would guess, are going to if they're taking the course, but this is just kind of it's good to just be really clear and upfront and about why they should open your email and what they're going to expect from it. I am going to show you on this next slide that Emma's gonna switch over for me. One example, like I mentioned earlier, I've been working on a Pro 1 welcome series, kind of getting people prepared for their Pro 1 course. And this is currently our subject line for the first email. And then, for some, if you're sending it in MailChimp, you probably don't have that like secondary subject line, but when you're working in like an email platform, you do kind of get that opportunity to kind of fill in the blank if you didn't in it and use it in the subject line. But it doesn't cover every single one of those topics I just shared. You don't need to do that every time, but I wanted to give you a couple examples on why these subject lines might work. So first of all, it centers the student. It says your upcoming course, your pro instructors. It's pretty clear and concise. It tells you what the email is about before you open it. So if you're interested in that, then hopefully it'll appeal enough to you to open it. And then again, it has search-friendly phrases such as AIARE Pro 1. And so Emma, let's go on to the actual email. So once you get people to open your emails, once again, there's some bullets here that I'll walk through that kind of help you frame those emails. Again, you're going to want to center your audience. Why should your student care about what's in that email? It's really about them. I know you're trying to convey the facts that you need them to know so that they come prepared and you can teach a successful course. And so, but making sure that they're getting the information they need is really important. Make it digestible. There's lots of ways to do that. Actually, you can use bullet points, short sentences. You could bold some things. I wouldn't say use all caps because sometimes that can be like you're yelling. So if you're going to do that, be selective. But that's, again, another way. There's lots of ways we can kind of make it a digestible thing so that people are looking at different areas. Like this is your packing list. This is your maybe your course itinerary, and calling those sections out can help students find what they're looking for really easily. It's important to keep it approachable. You can keep it professional, but also being approachable is pretty important. Avoid jargon. If it's a brand new Area 1 student, they may not know the technical jargon, so it's good to keep it really approachable, and introduce yourself in it can be another way to do that. Setting a welcoming tone. Emma kind of went through all of those things, using that beginner's mindset and thinking about what questions students might have. And a lot of times one way I like to think about what those might be are basically like FAQs, like what are people constantly asking you when they get to a course or after a course, things like that, that you can kind of think about, maybe this needs to be added. I get asked this question all the time. And then again, you can use the sense of urgency to help you get folks to I have clear calls to action as the second this bullet point. So that one basically is what it says. It's a clear call to action. Make sure if you have them, you want them to do the pre-course learning, that that call to action is really clear, whether it's bold or however you want to make that. And then lastly, just a sense of urgency again can be really helpful in getting students to take action so they don't just read the email, put it away, move on, forget about it. So those are the main tips I have for writing an email. And then in this next one, I'll show you an example of our welcome email that we send out to AIARE students after they've taken a course. If Emma, you don't mind, flipping to the next slide. Okay, so when a student, after they take a course, they get a handful of emails from us. And these emails are basically to introduce ourselves. We want, I think people know they just took an AIARE course, but they don't always know what that means. Who is AIARE? And so again, this email does kind of the things that I just mentioned. It centers the audience. It says, hey, first name of the person who took the course. We also center the audience by saying you recently took this course, so that they know that this is like really directed towards them. We've made it digestible by creating bullet points, highlighting areas that we really want people to pay attention to in orange, and then also trying to keep those sentences kind of short, and different paragraphs and things like that are all different ways you can do that. Again, approachable. It says, welcome to the AIARE community as soon as you open the email. So we're really trying to make being part of the AIARE community as approachable as possible. And that's like a pretty easy way to do it right away. And then introducing ourselves and who AIARE is. And then lastly, this email continues on, and there are more calls to action in it. But this one that you're seeing is basically saying, this is how you can access your AIARE course completion certificate. If you have questions, contact us here. So that is kind of my quick tips on how to do a good subject line and write a good email. I have some resources for you to help you if you're like, I don't have time for this, or this is not for me, but I know I need to do it well. And I'm happy to share those. But what I think is really important is like AI becomes a thing, and ChatGPT, because that's a resource that you actually can take advantage of. And I'm happy to show you how tonight. But I do think it's important to understand kind of what makes a strong subject line and what makes a strong email, so that you can identify if those resources that I'm sharing are giving you good results, or if you're like, hey, this doesn't sound like a human. This doesn't sound like something I would say. This is not working. So even though I'm going to give you some ways to kind of take this and, make it easier for you, I still think it's really important to have an idea of what makes a good email and makes a good subject line before you start using those resources. And Emma, I can show those now, or if you want, we can share them later.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. I think, we talked a little bit about, I think probably best to focus on subject lines in particular. And this is something that's like it can be kind of cool to mess around and see like what gets the most student eyes on your stuff. I think the emails themselves, Whit and I were talking about this earlier, the content of your emails is specific enough to your courses that it won't make sense to use a tool like ChatGPT for the emails. But I'm like okay, I'll admit my bias. I'm terrified of ChatGPT. I'm like, oh no, the looming threat of robots taking over. I can't deal
I
with it.
keep forcing it on her.
And Whitney's always like, she'll ask me for feedback on something, and then she'll be like, ChatGPT did the first draft of that actually. And I'm like, oh, I couldn't even tell. So she is slowly but surely winning me over. This is a tool that actually, despite my terror, is a lot easier to use than I had realized. And so, yeah, if you don't mind giving us like a super quick elevator pitch demonstration of how you would use ChatGPT to write a subject line, that would be awesome. I
Okay.
will stop sharing so you can share.
All right, let's see if I can figure this one out.
No pressure. You
Okay.
do not take longer to screen share than I do, so I think you're good.
Are we seeing it?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've pulled up ChatGPT. It's been a minute since I first started using this, but I believe you do have to create an account. It is free. There are paid ones, but you can use it for free.
Can you start,
So
Whitney, start for people like me who are like, how do I get to ChatGPT? Like how do I
sure.
go there?
So it's just chatgpt.com. I don't know what this extra part is,
Even
but
I
that's
can remember that.
so I think it's kind of fun. It doesn't always work, but honestly, like you're busy, email communication is probably not the thing that you want to spend most of your time on. And we understand that, but like I said, it's a really good idea to know what makes a good strong subject line before using this, because sometimes ChatGPT spits out something completely crazy or not human-like. I put this one in earlier, but basically what you do is you ask it, well, I'm sure a lot of you know this, but you ask basically the question that you're looking for. So I'm writing, improve this email subject line and then the subject line is pre-course homework for AIARE 2. And then you just hit go. And it's gonna just spit out some different options for us. And we can decide if these are good. You can also, so let's do that first. So we have get ready for AIARE 2 course, complete your pre-course homework. It says your, so I like that it has that centering the student. It kind of has that sense of urgency by saying it's time to complete your course homework. Let's go. It talks about what is happening. It has that like searchable aspect of the AIARE 2, and it's clear and concise. It tells you exactly what it's about. So that to me is a little stronger email subject line than what we started with, and then you can read through the other ones. You can get more detailed with ChatGPT than this. I just thought that was a quick, really easy way to show you that there's there's options if you're kind of stuck and you're struggling and you're like, I need it to do this thing, but I don't know. I don't know how to make the subject line feel stronger. There are resources for you. I'm going to show you one more, and at the end of this, I know and I are working on sending out something, so you'll have the links to these. This one helps you with multiple different things, but you can do the same here with emails. And this one, pre-course homework for your AIARE 2, analyze. Is almost a better tool if you're looking to like get better at understanding what makes a stronger email subject line. If you're wanting to get better at this and you're like, I don't know, let's see if it's working. I might not have enough service for it to. Okay, so it's saying, that's like a fine email subject line, and it tells you why. It gives you some new options like ace your AIARE 2, must do homework and tips, unlock success in AIARE 2, which I don't know why Siri just opened up. Sorry, it's about to. Interesting. Okay, so it's giving some options. I don't actually love these quite as much, all of them, as the ChatGPT, but it also kind of talks through what the score is for that. So that's another option for working through subject lines if you want to try to get better at it and think about some different tips for how to improve and you're just kind of stuck. So I wanted to make sure you had all of these resources, because why not work smarter and less? And we're all busy people. So there's these resources and we might as well use them.
Totally. Most of us are not sending nearly as many emails as Whitney, but it is really nice to have a resource like that that helps you. I also have found that, if you're sending especially if you use a Gmail email platform, if you send emails with the same subject line, it's sometimes it can get a little bit confusing, and that it'll thread those together. So you're like, wait, which course is this for? So definitely like nice to have if you mix it up a little bit. Even you can do a little bit of A and B testing, see like, do I feel like students engaged more? Did I get more responses to this email or that one? So even if you're not like a total communications geek like Whitney, still can be really useful to add some of that. Okay, we're going to go into some breakout rooms here in just a minute, and I am going to drop, how this is going to work is I am dropping a document in the chat now that everybody should be able to open, and you should be able to edit it. So click the link in the chat. Oh, good. I'm seeing lots of anonymous animals show up. Let's see. Awesome. Okay, I'm seeing a bunch of folks in here now, and I'll drop that. I think you should be able to access the chat even once you're in your breakout groups. So what I've done is I've dropped the information that was on Whitney's slides just now into the first page of this. In just a second, I'm going to have Zoom create 6 breakout rooms. So there will be 3 of you in each breakout room. And then when you are in your breakout room, click the corresponding group. So there's a bunch of links at the bottom of the first page, group 1, 2, 3. You should see that you're in like breakout group 4, click on that one, and then you all will work on that page. I think the assignment should be pretty straightforward, but I'm just gonna, I'll screen share for just a second so folks can see what I'm asking you to do here. Basically just wanna give folks a chance to practice this like with some other smart brains together, right? So some of these, like, there's only so many different combinations of words or ways to arrange the words that you're going to want to send to your AIARE 1 or Rescue or AIARE 2 students, right? Like there is probably one best subject line out there to send to your students. Maybe you'll come up with that tonight. What we're asking folks to do here is in your groups, you'll take these kind of lackluster, what was the word in punchy? They're not as punchy. And you can use some of the principles that we just learned to come up with some better subject lines for those. I'll have you spend a couple minutes on that, and then I can broadcast into the groups to let you know that it's time to switch it up. And then I've put just like a super bare bones pre-course email into each of the 6 groups pages of the document. And I'll have you work together using those principles that Whitney shared with us to make some upgrades to that so that it's a little bit more relatable. This is also an opportunity, you're welcome to make changes directly in there in your groups on your page, but also it's an opportunity to talk to one another about what you do, like what your pre-course communications include, when you send those out, how far in advance. I know sometimes, depending what provider you work for and how organized they are, your provider may send out the very first, like, hi, you're registered for this course. Here's what to expect. So curious to hear from one another what kinds of stuff you include in your pre-course communications. So this is an opportunity for that. We'll spend about a total of 15 minutes in these breakout groups. And actually maybe let's see, it's 7:41 my time, which is later than it is for all of you. It's 6:41 your time, or earlier. So we'll come back right on the hour, and then that will include our bio break as well. So, and I can broadcast a note into there, but I'll start closing the breakout rooms 2 minutes before, so we're all back right at the hour, and then we can wrap up with post-course communications and go on with our evening. So if you're not already in the document, go ahead and click on the document link in the chat. I see a bunch of you in here already. I'm going to put you in breakout rooms. And then let's see, create 6 breakout rooms. And then I'm just going to I'm just going to move a couple of folks around so that Whitney and I aren't in breakout rooms, but we will be in, Whitney, I'll just have you come back to the main room whenever you get, for some reason, I can't get you out of a breakout room, so I'll just have you come on back. but feel free to pop back in if you have questions here. So I'm going to open these. You should see which room you're in and head to that page. And I'm here if you have questions. Otherwise, I will see you all in 18 minutes. So we'll keep moving. Let's talk a little bit about post-course communications. I'll share a resource with folks here in at the end of the session, and Whitney and I will send out a version of it as well that folks are welcome to use. But just want to think a little bit about what belongs in a post-course communication. Again, getting the information about next steps is really what most students are really hungry for after their course. So students do get some post-course communications from AIARE after their courses. Whitney is in charge of those, and I know she'd be happy to share with folks what those look like. But those are a little bit of, if depending on which course you took, you get a little bit of information about what maybe some of the next courses you could take are. We also tell students a little bit about what discounts they're eligible for, whether it's on some of the mapping software companies that we partner with, or we also partner with Expert Voice and a couple of the other kind of pro deal 20% off kind of coupons, that kind of thing that rec students have access to. So that does come from AIARE, but it's really nice, especially if you've just had kind of for a lot of folks, it's a pretty intense experience to have like a couple days in the backcountry with a new group. And so having a little bit of a course closure that comes after your in-person course closure can be really nice and set people up for success to feel like part of the community. So a couple things that I think are really important to include in your post-course communications are, let's see, some AIARE resources. So what is AIARE? Hopefully you've given them a little bit of a little bit of information about who AIARE is and what AIARE does and like where this curriculum comes from. There's a lot of confusion about what AIARE is exactly, and that's okay for the rec student, but great for them to know that they can go to AIARE for more information. And Al, yeah, I just got your note here. A strong series of statements at the start that tells them what a good class they were, congratulating them, giving specific examples. How awesome does that feel, right? Like to come out of your class and hear from your instructor, like, you were a really fun class. I really enjoyed my time with you. Here are some really cool things that we experienced together. That's something that, when you teach, as folks in this course, if you teach 4 or fewer, or 5 or more courses a season, it's easy to like kind of put your head down and be like, okay, getting through my avalanche courses for the season. And after a long time, we know that these things can kind of start to blur together. But also it's like, for these folks, this is maybe the one time, it's certainly the first time for a lot of people, but it's maybe the one time they're going to do something like this. So having you take a second to remember some specific stuff that you did as a course together can go a long way towards making students feel like their experience was really unique, and also gives them a chance to feel like they are part of this community that we're welcoming them into. So kind of carrying forward that welcoming spirit that Whitney mentioned from the pre-course communications. So sharing some AIARE resources as well. We also ask that this is also a really good time to share provider resources. So if there are things like if you want to let folks know that they can still access their AIARE 1 Rescue or AIARE 2 online learning, if there are other courses that your providership offers, whether they're other AIARE courses, or maybe you also do wilderness medicine, maybe do summer rock guiding, things like that. This is a good time to keep folks involved with your providership specifically that you work for. Also a really good time to remind folks of those local and regional avalanche center resources. So maybe in your pre-course Zoom, you did some work identifying the local avalanche forecast. Maybe you showed them how you walk through the day's forecast and look at the weather resources that you're checking as you're making your tour plan. It's really nice to include some of those links, not just the here is the Avalanche Center webpage, or I use the NOAA weather resources, but here are the specific resources for the place that we were traveling. It can be really nice now that students have almost a face to the name, if you will, with the terrain that they were traveling in. It's really nice to get a chance to see what's the link. So now that I can picture that terrain in my mind's eye that I've been in, now is an opportunity for me to look at what to track the season's conditions there, not just the weather and the avalanche forecast, but both of those things together now that I can picture it, and maybe have some photos that I took on my tour. Also, some ways to stay connected to the avalanche community. This is more important to some people than it is to others, but it's nice to give the opportunity. So this can be a chance, particularly if it's a level 2 course, to let them know about the American Avalanche Association and let folks know that they can join as general members to get a subscription to the Avalanche Review. If you are somewhere that offers a regional snow and avalanche workshop that has programming geared towards recreationists, this is also a really good time to let them know about that. So I know some saws, Whitney and I always go back and forth about like which saws make sense to let recreational students know about. I, as an avalanche professional, sometimes show up to Seesaw and I'm like, I have no idea what's going on here. Like I'm really excited to know that someone a lot smarter than me is talking about all these like fracture mechanics, but it's like way over my head. So there are some saws that maybe wouldn't make as much sense for a recreational user, but also like I know the NSAW often has programming specifically for recreational users. I know that like there's a specifically a recreational day at the Utah SAW. So if you are somewhere that has resources like that, this is a great place to point your students to stuff like that too. Also, if you mention things like staying alive in avalanche terrain, the avalanche handbook, resources like that, those can also be really useful to students after the fact. If they're like, what's that book you mentioned? This is the time to let folks know what those are. And then also, if you work for a providership that requests post-course feedback from students, this is also a really good time to do that. Students are most likely to read the first email that you send out after your course. After that, they get like less and less likely, what's the opposite of exponentially? Less and less likely to open your subsequent emails, right? So those follow-up like reminder, ooh, I forgot to send the feedback link. Can you take it now? People aren't going to do it. I know that in part because I administrate these CE sessions every winter. And when I ask people to do the post-course feedback in the session, people will do it typically. That's when I get the most responses. And then when I follow up later, I'll see like 1 or 2, but for the most part, it really drops off because people move on with their lives, right? Like they're on to picking up kids from practice and skiing and riding and whatever else they have going on. So folks are most likely to respond if you have a call to action in that first email. So if you are going to request feedback either personally on your instruction or for your providership or anything else, now's the time to do it. Let's see. A couple other things that I think can be really, really useful to include are those specific follow-ups from your course. Al had a great point earlier about like specific things like, hey, you were a great class. Also things that like, if something specific happened on your course, for example, like whether it's something really cool, like, hey, we like saw this porcupine and that was a really cool memory that we all shared, or hey, we watched this avalanche from afar, that was really cool. If somebody had to take off early, this would be a good time to follow up with them individually. Just like any kind of specific things from your course, great to get some positive stuff in there, but also just like, hey, here are some things like a book that we talked about, even things that are more neutral. Nice to get that all in one place for students. And again, using the subject lines like Whitney mentioned earlier, like to let folks know this is a follow-up from your course. If I'm then the sort of person who's like, what was that book that they mentioned? Then I can go back into my email and search for follow-up from my AIARE 1 course. And then front and back links to AIARE curriculum. This is one where we really can continue to flex the educator muscle, what their next steps should be. Things like if this was an AIARE 1, maybe recommending that folks take a rescue course, vice versa. If you had a bunch of students who expressed interest specifically in snow or snow science or digging more snow pits, this is a good time to let them know like, yeah, you'll get to do more of that on an AIARE 2. Also, if you had in your specific travel group, if you're not a course leader, but you are following up with students, it also is a great time to let, if you had a group of students who was asking you, the 4 of us travel together often, what are some trip planning resources? One of us is interested in potentially taking the pro track. These are the kinds of things that people don't necessarily always follow through on, but when they're really excited about it, that's the time to get them that kind of information. So any way that it's possible to let folks know what their next step should be in terms of avalanche education and resources are great. And then also how they can continue to practice what they've learned between courses. So, thinking about practicing rescue, if there are certain ways that you like to set that up, that's a great opportunity to let folks know. I think it's also a nice way to stay accountable. Like, I practice rescue X times every season. Here's where I go to do it. Whichever of my buddies doesn't show up or doesn't, has the slowest time to unbury all of the transceivers, that's the person who's buying nachos when we get to the restaurant afterwards to meet up, right? So just thinking about like staying accountable to your students and giving them a little bit more information than just like, thanks, here's how to access your AIARE 1 online learning, et cetera, et cetera. Like, this is a time to do like a really good course close and really welcome people into our community. Okay, I have in the written resource that I'm going to share with you, there is more information on putting together a really good post-course email. I'm also happy to share some examples of that. The same principles really apply from the pre-course email, but I'm going to keep moving so we have some time for questions. So next steps for this group, the reason that I picked, as we're scheduling out our continuing education workshops for this season, I wanted to put this one as early as possible in the season because most folks won't be starting to teach courses for at least another month or so. So this gives you some time now that you've had a chance to think about this, and you'll get some more resources from us. This is an opportunity to sit down with your own templates for communication, or if you don't have any yet, to create them. And think about how you can improve your own communications with students. I also want to invite you to send your pre and post course templates to me if you'd like to. I'm not going to, necessarily advertise this to the entire instructor pool, but for folks who have shown up, that would be a lot of emails to go through. But for folks who have made the time to show up tonight, and clearly this is a subject that's of interest to you, if you'd like to send your pre or post course communications to me, this is my email address. You can also find it if you go onto the contact form at our website and let Sarah know what you're hoping to do. Sarah will be happy to pass that along to me. But I'm happy to review those. Typically for our course leader trainings, I usually like to pitch in and help out with some of the post and pre-course communication assignment grading, so giving feedback to folks on those courses. And I'm happy to extend that to folks here as well and make some specific suggestions for you all. Before I move on to questions, I have a couple things that I just want to give you. Let's see. First, I am going to send this. I'm going to send this to everybody. I think we should be, anyone with the link can view. So I'm going to drop this in the chat, and then Whitney and I will send you a version of it as well later in the, don't want to send that to one person, I want to send it to everyone. So this Google Doc is a resource on tools for course communication. I just have it as anybody with the link can view, so you can pop in here. The reason I've done that instead of a PDF is if you scroll all the way to the bottom, I've put a template for a really awesome pre-course email. Instructor trainers Sheldon Kerr and Kristen Arnold put this together. This is one of the emails that they send out to their students before courses. Sheldon and Kristen also, because they're instructor trainers, this went out before a CLT last year, I think. So there was a bunch of other stuff that was, specifically pertained to the CLT, but man, those two do an awesome job of setting up a PLE before the course even starts. They ask a bunch of great questions. They really take the time to get to know their students beforehand. This is probably more in depth than you would want to go for a rec course, but you can pick and choose. And that's kind of the nice thing about a template, is that you can pull out anything that you don't want, but it's all there to start with. So I've highlighted in yellow anything that you would need to change, but this is kind of a nice starting point if you're like, not super happy with what I've been using, I'm going to start from scratch. So wanted to share that with you all. And then of course, this breakout room session, that's yours, and I'll send the link to folks who are in, just to folks who are here, so that you can maintain or retain that in case you want to look back on some of the subject lines that you developed together. I'm also going to send, I think I've made, oh, nope. Want to make it so everybody can view this. This is a resource specifically on fostering inclusive learning environments on AIARE courses. This goes out on course leader trainings as well. So if you haven't done a CLT in the last 4 years, you may not have seen this version. But it's kind of a nice primer on how to establish a PLE, what that means, what some of the terms we use are, and there are a bunch of resources at the bottom that we have found really useful over the years and that folks have passed along to us. And then, of course, as always, I'm going to just send over this link in the chat. So if before you take off tonight, I will of course include this in the follow-up email, but if you don't mind giving us some feedback on this before you take off for the night, that would be great. Last couple things, a little bit of housekeeping. We do have 3 more free upcoming webinars for area instructors. We're trying out these tracks this year. So we've got some things on technical skills, socio-emotional skills, things geared toward new instructors, and things geared towards leadership skills. These are the last 3 that are coming up, but we also have a bunch of free and discounted opportunities for area instructors this season as well. So I'm just going to really quickly run to the CE page because I want folks to see, of course, this is going to take a second to load. You should be able to see here that you can find opportunities by those tracks that I just mentioned. Particularly for this group, wanted to mention, since this webinar is in the leadership track and many of you are pretty experienced or course leaders, we have a couple of other opportunities that the Mountaineers have partnered with us on. So particularly wanted to draw your attention to this leadership development series. It's a really awesome series of talks with some really smart folks who think about risk management and leadership. And let's see, I think, yeah, here are all the dates. Some of these have already started, but you can see there's I think there's almost 30 of these throughout the season, and they are free to area instructors, even if you are not a Mountaineers member. So please take advantage of that. Want to make sure that people know about that. I'll send out an email to staff or to all of our instructor pool again, so folks know, but wanted to make this group in particular aware, since I sense that leadership skills are probably of importance and interest to you all. I think that's all my housekeeping. So with that in mind, I'll stop sharing my screen, and Whit and I are available to answer any questions you all have before you take off. We won't take it personally if you don't have any questions either. You all have my email address, and you're always welcome to send not only your those drafts, but if you have feedback on these webinars, feel free to drop that in the forum, or send me an email personally, and we read and respond to everyone that we get. So we really appreciate that feedback. You are who makes it possible to deliver high quality avalanche education to recreational students, and really appreciate that you all have made the time to really lean into your CE and not just check the box, but really be thoughtful about how you show up and how you show up to your students. So thank you all so much. We really appreciate it.